Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 212. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of March 2023. And it is crazy to think that we are already in March. 2003, for me, honestly feels like it started literally a few weeks ago. But yet, here we are. Things have been kind of interesting over the last 2 weeks for me in particular. Things just haven't really gone my way for the most part. I've had a lot of sad news kind of come my way, a lot of disappointments in the form of a new video game I was playing. It was one I was anticipating kind of for the most part. I was looking forward to it, let's just say, and it kind of hasn't lived up to expectations. Like, I wasn't really hyped for it. It was more the fact that I was more optimistic for it, and it hasn't really got me all too happy or excited about it. But I'm only a couple hours into it, and I kind of want to give it more of a chance, so I'm going to probably do that after this recording. But yeah, I've been a bit sad in terms of things that I've heard about, seen, know about, which has been really unfortunate given how positive and how, I guess, happy I was on the previous podcast. But I'm not going to let that stop this podcast. I'm not going to bring it down, although we do have some absolute garbage to talk about on this episode. But yeah, in terms of positives, there are other games that have released this year that have been pretty good for the most part. I think the industry, more accurately, the indie scene has really been killing it with some of their releases. And, you know, we've got some good films. I still would highly recommend Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and stuff like that. But let's get on to some new stuff that we have to talk about. And we have a couple of trailers on this very weird episode. Everything's just kind of odd in terms of its context and subject matter for the most part, with the first trailer, and that is going to be for Mafia Mama, which is an upcoming film starring Toni Collette, who is going to carry this film for sure because she is a fantastic actor or actress, however you want to say that. And yeah, it honestly feels like a 90s film in terms of its core concept, or the gimmick, if you will. You know, I can kind of see it back in the day if this was to come out in the early, well, I guess more accurately, the late 90s, early 2000s. It would kind of have a sort of trailer reading or narration of like, oh, she's going from house mom to mafia boss. It's Toni Collette is Mafia Mama. It really does have that kind of sound and that ring to it. And it does come across more like a slice of life comedy, as it's not an overly funny film. Not to say that the film isn't funny. I thought a lot of the jokes were actually pretty good. They do hit. They feel natural. Like, it's something a fish out of water would say. And I think Toni Collette's delivery and her reactions are perfect for the kind of character she is and is, I guess, going to kind of become, or is in this certain situation for the most part. And I do love, like, smaller little jokes, like how she actually thinks about killing her husband who has cheated on her. It's funny and unfortunately relatable, because I'm pretty sure anyone who has had them, not necessarily had them, has been cheated on or gone through a breakup that's not been the best. I'm sure they've probably thought about that before, so I give them points for a line like that. And there are some really generic elements in this trailer as well, which I kind of hope that are either small aspects or there's a twist to them. You know, like, for example, the love interest and the detractor who doesn't really like the change or thinks she's not going to be the mafia mama or whatever they're going to call her in this, or the Don, I think it would be. Yeah, it does have some potential for the most part. It does feel a bit generic, and it does also kind of come across as a film more for the ladies. I'm not trying to say that it's a feminist film or anything. It just feels like it's something more geared towards a female audience that can really relate. And I think that's maybe the key word with this film, is just relatable to some extent. Maybe coming off the whole idea of maybe when you marry into someone and their family's from a different country, you know, it kind of can feel like you're stepping into a new or an alien world. That's possibly where this film is coming from or going towards, which I give it props for, and I think it's worth discussing. Hopefully this one is actually pretty good for the most part. The next trailer we have is going to be for Sisu. I believe that's how it's said. And basically coming across as John Wick 1994, it seems to be following a... I don't know. I don't necessarily know what he is. I think he is a farmer who strikes gold and is going to try and deliver it to said bank during World War II. And it does kind of, much like the series is taking heavy inspiration from, being John Wick, the plot is simple. You know, assholes mess with the wrong guy. He turns out to be literally the Terminator to some extent. And it is a beautiful looking film. That's the first thing I noticed, is that for a World War II film, there's actually color in it. Within media, especially the Hollywood mainstream stuff, whenever it's a, World War II era-ish film, it's always got to be dark, it's got to be saturated, it's got to look ugly, which I get it reflects the time, but that wasn't how the world looked for the most part. So I give them props for actually making this look like a film. Like, they've managed to combine like the brutal violence with like really great comedy timing. Like, it has a real sense of like surprising weight to each hit or like violent act, whatever you want to call it. Like, seeing a mine land on a man's head and him blow up is hilarious. While the impact is still felt, it kind of makes you go, oh, it's shocking, surprising. And I like that element. You don't know what this character is going to do or how, these Nazis are going to end up dying. I was also getting a lot of like Mad Max Fury Road vibes from this film, especially when you see that shot of like the ladies all lined up in a row with guns. It kind of reminded me a lot of, I forget the guy's name, but his wives in that film. So I do wonder if they're going to kind of come in, join the fight and kind of, take back their land or, fight this small army that seems to be going up against this farmer character. Like, they really made him look like a total badass. Like, just taking on a small army, like, and the fact that he has like the balls to just like literally run or charge at them by shielding himself from gunfire, and he just lights himself on fire to jump into a water for whatever reason. Like, that's bordering on crazy, but it's awesome in terms of a concept. Like, it's very hard to make a badass look believable, and I feel like this film is maybe going for a little bit more farcical in terms of making this guy like literally, as I think one of the trailers, not one of the trailers, the trailer alludes to the fact that, is he immortal? And yeah, given how he's acting, I guess he either thinks he is or literally is, or it's, plot armor for the most part. But yeah, I also do wonder, given how nonchalant some of the people are in this film, is this like a sort of like meta commentary on like how laid back Finnish people are? I do wonder if that's kind of like an inside joke that maybe European or people from Finland are going to get or really resonate with, which if so, I think that's a brilliant concept, just to have people just be like, oh yeah, this and that. And, at the very end of the trailer where he kind of like hooks the pickaxe into the plane, and like the guy just says, yeah, I think we have a problem, just like, just this nonchalant, like, yeah, we're probably going to die. He's going to get us. Yeah, it's over. I really do like that. And I think this could potentially be one of the better films to come out this year if it is able to kind of nail all the elements it's going for in terms of, let's say, that Mad Max, John Wick aesthetic. I don't know really what you'd call that. I mean, it's not really a gimmick. It's more a, I don't know. I guess you could say it's a staple, more or less, with John Wick, the badass who kills everyone. Or genre, I guess, at this point. Yeah, I guess it is. Next trailer we have is another small one, which I'm kind of looking forward to, and that is going to be Living with Chucky. Chucky as in the serial killer doll from the Child's Play series. And this documentary is a long time coming, I would think. Like, given Chucky's consistency and his iconic status in like horror films and the film landscape as a whole, I'm surprised he didn't do one earlier. But you could kind of see this also as another, I don't know, not really another, but you could consider it like a marketing, advertising film in order to promote the TV series. But it honestly does feel like it's coming from a very earnest place for the most part. It also just reminds me that I need to watch more of the films from the series. I've only seen the first, and I am kind of intrigued by the TV series. I did hear decent things about it, but, I don't think I can just start with that for the most part. And yeah, it will be very interesting mainly to see like the behind the scenes videos from the filming of all these films and the practical effects and how they did it, because I do think that for the most part, like, Chucky still looks pretty good in all of his films. Like, he looks great. Like, obviously it's a lot of like animatronics and puppetry, but it works. And I'd imagine those effects are much better in the TV series, given they have a bigger budget, technology has advanced, and they kind of know what they're doing for the most part. And even if they have to create some technologies in order to achieve certain things, they'd probably be the ones, I guess, leading that technology for the most part. So it'd be very interesting to see the kind of contrast between how they started with Child's Play to, I'd imagine they're going to talk about Chucky and promote that, and how the effects or what they're doing with the character and that kind of stuff, which I think is really, really cool for the most part. And I do really like it when you do have like a hardcore fan base to a franchise that's like not too big like Star Wars, but not too small where it's obscure and would never get a, I guess, documentary film, to kind of give the fans something and a little bit more. And even for those who aren't necessarily into it, and let's say they've only ever seen the TV series, they can kind of follow along and get caught up and kind of understand why Chucky is so prominent in media, or why this TV series works or doesn't work to some extent. But yeah, and also, as a random little fact, look up Chucky on WWE or WCW, because yeah, he challenged some fighter named Ricky to, I guess, a fight for some reason. I don't know. He was just talking shit for the most part. And it's the most random thing in WWE, and that's saying something given some of the scenes and storylines that have happened in WWE. But yeah, I wanted to throw that in because that is just, yeah, it needs to be seen to be believed. And speaking of which, we have our next trailer, which is which is called Smoking Causes Coughing. And this is coming from director, I always have a hard time pronouncing his name, but I think it is Quentin Dupieux? Not Dupieux, I think it's Quentin Dupieux. I'm always struggle, I think it's Dupieux? I'm not sure, but I'll give you the spelling of his second name, which is Dupieux. I believe that's how his name is pronounced, but I'm just going to refer to him as Quentin, as I believe that's how you say his first name in English, as he is a Frenchman. I'm a big fan of Quentin's like music under the name Mr. Oizo, which is spelled Oizo. And I haven't seen a lot of his films, unfortunately. I know of one of his most famous films being Rubber, which was released back in 2010, and that was a film about a sentient car tire that killed people. So, yeah, but I aim to change that with this film, and I'll be frank, this film looks great. Like, it's dumb but unique in a way. Like, it shows a more human and down-to-earth side, and I guess take on superheroes, or, you know, Power Rangers, which is obviously parodying, which is really refreshing as a concept, because even superhero films nowadays don't ever show superheroes being normal. Maybe in the comics, or maybe in the comics of the past, but it's usually just, oh, it's Thor and he's super powerful and he's going to beat the bad guy, and this is Thor and he is the superhero and he does the superhero things. Or, you know, with so many other of Marvel and DC's films where they don't really give their superheroes any kind of character, and either they want you to forget or they forget that they are human at the end of the day. Well, most of them. Yeah, the heroes feel honest yet fake at the same time. Like, there is one scene in the trailer where I guess the leader of the squad, he's kind of, I think their robot companion, is like trying to wash them off of the blood that have just got on their costume, and he's like, oh yeah, I hope that's water coming out of that nozzle, and everyone kind of like awkwardly chuckles, and it's like something you would hear a character say at the end of an episode of a 60s cartoon. He's kind of nailed that weirdness that those shows or that media had at the time. You know, it's not funny at all, but it's funny because it's not funny in some sense, or that it's, you know, obviously cheesy or bad. Yet you have moments where they're generally vulnerable and honest for the most part. Even just that same character, you know, literally smoking a cigarette, and him just saying, you know, the title film, you know, smoking causes coughing. It's kind of a bleak scene and a bleak line for the most part. And I do, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just like I'm just like thinking about how good this film is. It does come across as very believable yet batshit insane. And like, Quentin himself is no stranger to puppets if you know his music career, but the rat looks gross as hell. Like, it's drooling, and there might even be like a sex scene with one of the women. It looks awkward, intentionally awkward, and it's just probably going to make me sick depending on how far they go with it. And like the monster costumes, they're really cool. They look actually quite detailed, very of the time for the most part, in terms of like the Power Rangers era and some of the other newer media that have used costumed monsters in that, which there are quite a few films that are kind of going back to the era of, I don't know, the 80s, 90s, you know, superheroes fight the guy in the costume kind of stuff. And the practical gore effects are wonderfully campy. Just seeing that just nasty blood and guts just splatter on their costume it's great. He clearly knows what he's doing, and I'm really happy that he's still making films and still just kind of being weird and wonderful and, yeah, just kind of being out there. I do hope this gets a wider release over here in the UK. I definitely want to see it. And like I said before, kind of want to catch up on his films and kind of see where he goes because, yeah, he definitely is really good at bizarre visuals and kind of just telling an odd story that is kind of intriguing for the most part. Next trailer we have is going to be for Peter Pan and Wendy. This is Disney's next obligatory live-action remake of one of their retellings of an already existing story. And yeah, watching this trailer, it's clear that Disney is going to have a very bad year this year again, because this does not look good at all. Now, I'm going to ignore the very obvious bait that's in this trailer. I'm not even going to mention it. But I think this film has rightfully been memed on. If you go to any of the trailers, you'll see people basically making fun of it, saying things like, oh, the part where Peter Pan said Autobots roll out, that sent shivers down my spines, and, jokes of that line, and people actually making really good criticisms and commentary regarding some of the awfulness within this trailer. And it is just bizarre, like, Hollywood just can't stop retelling the story, and I'm honestly not sure why. I don't know if it's because it's, like, maybe considered a very beloved story, or it's very adaptable, or very simple, but very few people have actually ever done anything that's actually interesting with this story. And I mean, should we really be telling this story today, based on the fact that Peter himself can be considered a child predator? He's a boy, or a child, who doesn't grow up, therefore technically making him a man, hanging around with children. I understand that in the original story, I'm pretty sure the person who wrote it, I can't remember their name right now, I'm pretty sure they were not alluding to that, and that wasn't their point when they wrote the story. It was meant to be a fantasy fairy tale about, crazy, wonderful things that happen. I mean, it has fairies and sirens in it, but I find it a bit bizarre they haven't changed that up in some sense, but I do feel like they're probably going to try and justify it through shit changes in the story, because Disney won't change the story too much because, it's nostalgia bait. They want you to remember how good the original film was, despite it having its problems. And like, how many times can you reimagine the same thing and offer nothing more than just a diverse cast? Like, all they're doing is just shouting, please look at our diverse cast, we're diverse. And like, it's nothing impressive. Like, everyone does this. Like, it's nothing new. And why even bother? Like, besides obviously nostalgia bait and, it's still being, well, and money as well. But, the marketing or the gimmick of nostalgia, it's very, how do I put it? It is fading, I think, to some extent, because the people you are marketing this nostalgia to, they're going to grow up and they're going to get tired, especially when every single attempt at pulling at their heartstrings just falls flat on, their face for the most part. And I mean, there's no point even doing another Peter Pan film, especially when Hook exists. And that is, one of the best, Peter Pan stories. It's not perfect, but it's really good. And even Hollywood themselves, kind of going back to my previous statement, they tried a few times to do a Peter Pan film and they've never succeeded because they want to turn it into a franchise. I know one of them that had, I was about to say Jack Nicholson. I think it's Hugh Jackman. They had Hugh Jackman as not Captain Hook, but a different pirate villain, but Hook was a normal guy, and it was kind of going to try and be like an origin story set up for a series where Hook becomes the ultimate bad guy, which, yeah, that's a fine premise, but it's not really needed. I don't think we really need a Peter Pan cinematic universe. It's not necessary for the most part. And there's so many issues with this film, like both narratively and technically, like how they still include Native Americans in this story. Like, isn't the whole point of this remake not to portray yourself as like racist or like insensitive? Because that's the reason the original film is not considered great today, because of its very racist depictions of Native Americans. And here you have Native Americans because the original had Native Americans in it. Like, you're failing to even do the bare minimum of a shit remake. Like, what is going on, Disney? Like, you need to figure this shit out. And like, the fact that there are girls in the Lost Boys group negates Wendy's importance as a girl. Like, now she's just British. there's nothing special about her now if there's lost boys within the lost girls group. Like, you've kind of missed the point. To some extent, she was kind of seen as a love interest or a mother to the lost children because they are lost. They have no real authority other than Peter Pan, who isn't exactly the best role model for them. And you've kind of messed that up. You know, she's just, she can kind of fly and kind of do what Peter Pan does. It's not very great for the most part. I mean, the trailer is edited like so fast in like such a way that like it feels like it's embarrassed by himself, and it kind of just wants to show you the best bits and get out of your existence. And like, there's so many questions I have with this trailer in this film. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on. Like, why does Big Ben blow up? Like, why have they shot this film with like the widest lens possible? Like, we don't need depth in this film. We don't need to see everything and have like a concaved look to everything. Like, you know, I don't get it, especially when this film looks really budgeted. Like, I don't expect every single film that's going to be released in cinemas or on a streaming service to have like a $2 million budget, but you can do more with less, which plenty of films have proven in the last couple of years. Just look at films like Barbarian. Just look at films like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish 2. That, as an animated film, had a budget of 90 million, which is unheard of in the industry, especially if you're making a big blockbuster animated film. Yet this film looks like a TV special, like it had a budget of like, what, 10 million? I'm honestly just confused. And like, this film, it looks technically bad. Like, the color correction is shockingly poor. It's miserably dark. You can't even see Peter Pan's shadow because they made him look like a realistic shadow. So now you can't tell that it's his shadow, despite him being a more solid formed shadow in the original animated film or any other adaptation which did it much better. The CGI right now looks like cartoony PS3 graphics, and like the dialogue as well in of itself, it's just cringy. Like, it's very obvious they're trying to appeal to more, well, they're trying to appear more accepting and more progressive and, dare I say, woke. But it's very transparent that they're only trying to cater to the Twitter audience who would, you know, eat them up alive if they've ever seen the original Peter Pan by Disney. But they clearly haven't. The only good thing I can say about this film, because I know I've been really, really mean about it, and I think it's deserved because it looks like trash, is Hook himself. He looks great. He has drip. And that's all I'm going to say. Let's move on to our final trailer, which is kind of going to come from the Sony's State of Play. Not to be outdone by Nintendo, Sony rushed together a State of Play to kind of spite them, and this State of Play was just boring as fuck. The only good thing they mentioned was the Resident Evil 4 reimagining. They showed off another trailer, and since then Capcom has shown off more, so I'm going to just negate that from the podcast because, you know, it's not really a highlight of their presentation. It's more Capcom being awesome. But the only other trailer they did show off was for the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It was a gameplay kind of behind the scenes featurette video where the makers of the game kind of talk about how the game is going to play and what's going to happen in it, gameplay and that. And yeah, we did finally get to see how this game plays. And I think unanimously people were extremely disappointed, unfortunately. I think coming from Rocksteady, the studio that brought us the Batman Arkham games, some of the highest regarded, not only video games, but video games based on superheroes, it's honestly shocking to see this game because I'll be frank, it looks like a slightly more realistic Fortnite. I'm just going to say it. And I think a lot of people are kind of seeing that. I will give the game props. The way you're flying around, zooming around, grappling on things, swinging, landing down, taking out enemies, that looks smooth. That looks really well done in execution. Animation-wise, it does look a bit janky in terms of how some of the animations end and start and how you kind of grapple onto things. It doesn't quite have that smoothness, but the element of you moving, I think, looks great. The biggest problem I think people have with this trailer is the fact that they do bring up the fact that it's going to be an online service, essentially, so much like Fortnite, like I said previously, and that it's going to be a loot shooter. It's going to have guns, it's going to have you collecting things, upgrading things, stats, items you need to equip. Basically, microtransactions are going to be in this game. It's going to have its own shop. The way these companies go about making these things is the game's release broken, but the shop itself is finished and ready for you to spend your hard-earned or your parents' hard-earned money, because they make the grind incredibly frustrating in hopes that people just get so annoyed, they give up, and they just put money down to buy these things. The industry has stopped calling them microtransactions. They now call them time savers. Because that's why I play a video game. I play a video game not to progress, but to spend more money to get things now. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. When and if the video game industry crashes or, falls from a even bigger grace, this will be the game that we will all collectively point at as the one game that brought the industry down. This is disgusting what Warner Brothers is doing. Their practices are pretty bad. The reason why this game has microtransactions in it is because they knew that the Hogwarts Legacy game was going to be a guaranteed success. That's why there's no real microtransactions in this game, but they can always add them in because I think they're just going to try and take advantage of Harry Potter fans and milk them for everything they're worth, because they're so desperate for anything Harry Potter related that is even remotely good. And so with this game, they've seen an opportunity. Oh, you play as 4 or 5 characters. It plays like the Borderlands. It plays like the Fortnite. Oh, Fortnite has microtransactions. Let's just do the same. People aren't going to question it. And people did question it, and people are frankly quite pissed. Understandably, I'm pretty annoyed, and I'm more annoyed for people who are really excited for this game. I had absolutely no interest in this game. I thought the story was going to be interesting, but now my hype on any kind of interest is completely gone. I'd imagine this trailer in itself has sunk the game, and I suspect it's going to perform poorly. Probably almost as bad as the Avengers game that came out a couple of years ago. Let's not forget that Arkham Knight came out and that performed pretty badly. It's just a travesty at the end of the day, and it's games and companies and situations like this that make me not want to play games or even talk about them or even be excited for them, knowing that I'm just going to be disappointed and I'm just going to be taken for granted of. So that's my 2 cents on that situation. I'm going to bury this game because they pretty much buried themselves or started digging their own grave with this garbage. But yeah, sorry to end on a kind of negative note, but I think it had to be said. I'm sure other people are saying this about this game, but it's just shocking how low a company will go. And I'm not necessarily going to blame Rocksteady. I should say that because it might be, at the end of the day, Warner Brothers' decisions to say, you need to do this, you need to do that. We're in charge of you. We own you. So if you're going to direct hate, please direct it at Warner Brothers games for the most part. Not unless we find out that this is Rocksteady's doing. But hey, we'll see. The game is a couple months away, and I'm sure all the reviews negatively downvoting it and destroying it, ripping a new one will, let us know just how bad it is. But I'm rambling at the moment. We have to end this podcast with the video of the episode, which is going to be for Metronomy. I don't know why I can't say this name. Metronomy. What the hell happened there? Metronomy. Sorry, everyone. My brain just stopped working for a moment there, so excuse that. Metronomy with Night Owl. The reason I picked this music video that was released a couple years ago is because Quentin himself, who is the director of Smoking Causes Coughing, also directed this music video because he directs films and music videos as well as his own music videos sometimes. So yeah, I wanted to leave you with this music video just so you can kind of get a taste of more of his directing skills and his vision and ideas and concept for the most part. It's a great song. Please check out the band. I've been really enjoying them over the last couple of weeks, kind of really getting into their sound. It's also nice to just kind of hear another really good British band. And yeah, I guess there isn't really much else to say about this podcast. Sorry if it kind of sounded a bit too negative towards the end, but like I said before, these things needed to be said. So there you go. But yeah, I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.